during our reaction prior to it beginning this week, I was talking about episode number 4 and last week's episode and how it was almost near anime perfection, to where the plot, the setup, the build up, everything was just like almost perfect. It was like every duck was falling in line for last week's episode, where it came to be Will versus the undead god. And I really felt that in my being last week. And last week's episode really got me re-excited for this anime overall. I would say the Faraway Paladin has been pretty good, but it hasn't been anything that I'm just like, oh man, I can't wait to watch it next week. I can't wait again. Like, if I had to wait 2 or 3 weeks, it's like, oh yeah, the Faraway Paladin, and I jump back into it, I would have been okay with that. But last week's episode really was like, left me on like the edge of my seat, and I was like, I need to see what happens with Will. I need to see what happens between him and the undead guy. Does he make it? Does he save Blood? Does he save Mary? What's going to end up happening? How is he going to handle their deaths? What's going to, like, all of these different things, these emotions, these things happened with last week's episode. That got carried into this week's episode, and this week's episode was a beautiful episode. Like, one of the highest compliments I can give an anime is when the writing and the scenes that are conveyed on screen are so beautiful that they invoke an emotion in you. And this week, there was two different subsets, 2 different scenes, for me specifically, that invoked serious emotion. I felt my eyes getting watery. You know, I felt like I really felt for the characters on the screen. And that's when you know you're watching something that is a step above the majority, is when you can watch it and it literally does invoke those feelings and those emotions in you for watching something. The 2 moments for me specifically were obviously when Will had to deal with I guess it was like 3 scenes almost, but when he had to deal with like the trauma of realizing that he wasn't going to be able to save Will and Blood. He wasn't going to be able to save Blood and Mary. No matter what he did, Blood and Mary were going to go away. And after he defeated the undead god, temporarily, essentially, but after he defeated the undead god, Blood and Mary were still there. And the reason that they were there is because the goddess Gracefield had allowed them to stay a little bit longer, but they were in fact going to disappear. They lost their connection. They lost the thing that was attaching them to the world twice. The undead king, and then now they lost Will, right? And then with the undead god being gone, there's nobody to support their undeadness, essentially. So they had to convey the emotion to Will, like, hey, we're going to go away. And, Will had to fight through that. Like, he realized it, he knew it, and he knew there's nothing he could do. And he felt helpless in that moment. And he conveyed to them of, I know this is wrong, but selfishly, like, I don't care if you guys have to cheat. Like, I want you guys to meet my children, my grandchildren. I want you guys to teach them things. I want you to be a part of their lives. I want you to be a part of my life for a little bit longer. And during that whole scene, like, I could feel it in me, like, just watching that, like, I am getting really emotional. The other scenes, he finally shared a legit moment with Gus, right? Gus ended up giving him all his money. After Will had poked a little bit of fun, he was like, oh man, you're still here? He's like, I was hoping to take all your treasures and stuff. And in that scene, it was playful, but it was also emotional too. And Gus ended up giving Will the last name, because he's like, you need a last name. He ended up giving Will the last name of Mary Blood. And then Will did one further. He's like, and my middle name, G, for Gus, right? So William G. Mary Blood. And that one wasn't as emotional, but it was still, like, pretty, like, powerful, And then the anime ends, and, we get to see Will go on, finally leave the area to go on his adventure, and Gus wishes him well. He's like, I have 10 years, so I'll see you before then, kind of thing. Will's now tasked with figuring out how to take down the undead king officially. He's tasked with spreading the word of Gracefield, because apparently her followers have dramatically dropped, and just the actions that she took today have heavily diminished her power. And 3, he has to figure out how to just, to live, right? So he has a lot of things that are going to be on his back, a lot of weight that are on his shoulders. Then, the anime, after he leaves, right, the anime, gives us credits, and the after credit scene shows us, and I wasn't prepared for this one, but it shows us Mary and Blood, and it was right before the final battle with the undead king, or whatever the king guy is. It was right before the battle with the king, and it shows us Blood defeating a demon, and then it shows Mary right there, and it shows a conversation that they had of Blood, in a very Blood way, kind of confessing to Mary his love and saying that he doesn't want her to be there and she should not be in the final battle just because he couldn't stand losing her. Like, if he had to go, he had to go, but he couldn't stand watching that happen. And then I like how Mary's really playful with him. She threatens him, like, if you don't let me go, I'll off myself. And he's like, oh my gosh. And they go, and then they begin going and trucking their way to their last battle. And as they begin to have a conversation, they keep showing the church or wherever they were staying at for the next 200 years. They kept showing it in the background because Blood ended up being like, we should find a place on a mountain. We should find a place with a nice breeze. We should find a place where we can just settle down. And it just kept showing that house, right, that they were living in currently. And then they begin talking, and they begin chatting about, one day we should have a kid, and we should get Gus to train, to tutor them in magic, and Mary's like, he'd be reluctant, but he would do it. And then they started talking about, I would train him to be a warrior and be stronger than me. And then Mary's like, I would train him to have, a conscience and to not be a piece of crap and to, be a good man and to be able to do chores, and basically describing all the things that they have been doing with Will. And then they build up to a point, he's like, oh, and I even picked out a name. And she's like, oh, gosh, what kind of name would you pick out? And he's like, he would need to have, like, a very strong will. So his name would be William or Will. And then Mary ends with, oh, my baby boy Will. And then they go on to the fight, to their last fight ever. And it was just a very emotional scene to watch, to see them plan out, and to conversely know that even in death, essentially, they were able to still live out their dream, which just kind of further, as a viewer, it further impacts you to know that they were able, the reason that they felt good about passing on was they were able to live out the one thing that they wanted to the most, and they were able to do that through Will, and I thought that was a beautiful thing. I thought this was just a beautiful episode. It was really emotional. It was really good. It was really, really, really good writing. And I'm very excited for what comes for Will next as he moves on for his adventure. But the episode was just really good. It was just so enjoyable, and it was impactful. It was emotional. It was action-packed. All the things that I wanted from an anime episode. I felt like they really knocked it out the park on this one. Let me know what you guys thought about this episode down in the comments below. Let me know if it was as emotional for you as it was for me. Make sure, if you guys haven't already, you want to see my reaction, you want to see me hold back some tears, make sure you guys go check our reaction over here. And y'all, I'll see you guys next week for episode number 6 as Will begins to make his journey to the human world. And I'm interested to see what his first interaction is going to be like. Regardless, I appreciate you guys being here. We'll see you guys next week.